Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. It is part 2 of some of my favorite artists. I highlight 2 artists and I showcase several books, several covers that they worked on that I'm a big fan of. Not everything in my collection, but just some of the books I was able to grab. So for this video, as you can tell by the title, I'm going to be going over Neal Adams and Jack Davis. All know who Neal Adams is. He was very, very famous for doing Batman and Detective Comics. He was famous for doing a lot of things. He worked on X-Men. I don't have any X-Men books with me in hand, but he worked on X-Men in the late 60s with, I believe, Denny O'Neil for, I think, issue 60, the Sauron issue, and afterwards, or the last couple issues, I think Denny O'Neil was involved with at least 1 or 2 of those. But anyway, such an amazing artist. And I met Neal Adams. I met him I said this story. I met him a week before my son was born. Met him at Zap Comics. Now, this cover right here, I know another one of his famous Batman covers. I'm not a big fan of this. I do not like the way Two-Face is drawn at all. He looks kind of goofy to me. I know that might be sacrilege to say to some of the Neal Adams fans, but I've never been a fan of this cover. Just not a fan of it. I like Two-Face, but it just seems a little off. Probably my favorite Neal Adams cover, and that's hard to say, because he's done so many great things, not just in Batman and Marvel, because he's worked on X-Men, he's worked on quite a few titles in Marvel, and of course in DC. But this, what I would have to say, is my absolute favorite, Batman 227. It's a cover swipe of Detective Comics 31. I think it's a better rendition of that cover. Some may disagree, prefer the Golden Age classic issue, which it most certainly is, over this one. Well, yeah, so do I. I prefer that issue over this any day, but I like the cover of this much better. It's such a great cover. The way the fog's coming in at the old mansion. Look at that. Oh, sorry for the glare. Great cover. Here's another one of my personal favorites, this one. I love this cover. I love reds and yellow and black. And we have the introduction of the Reaper. How could I not like this one? And of course the last one, no, not the last one, excuse me, last one for Batman rather, that I'm going to show. That is a big favorite. The Batman 251. Like the 234, the modern introduction of Two-Face. Although I like the cover, I'm not that much of a fan of this cover. It just doesn't really... I mean, the Joker's drawn pretty maniacally. For those that don't have it, it looks pretty creepy. And it's a return to the Joker being a psychopath in this issue, because previously in the 1960s he was more like a bumbling clown, because they really toned things down. But here, when we got to the 70s, they changed it up again. But I don't know, to me the cover just looks a little plain. Just looks a little too plain for me. Although plain is not bad, but just for in that particular book, not so much. And of course, I think one of his most famous covers, the Green Lantern, Green Arrow 76. Great cover. I've always, I'm not a fan of the Green Lantern or the Green Arrow. Really could not care less about either of those characters. But I love the way Neal Adams drew this cover. It's, again, really, really well done. All right, that's it for Neal Adams. Now let's get on to Jack Davis. A lot of you mainstream comic book fans out there probably never even heard of Jack Davis or have anything from Jack Davis. He was mainly a pre-code horror artist. He's done obviously other things over the years. He died a few years ago, so he was one of the last EC artists to survive. You know, a lot of the EC artists died. I think Wally Wood died in the early 80s. I could be wrong. I think he died in the early 80s. Johnny Craig died in 2001. Bill Gaines, well, he's not an artist, but he's the publisher of EC. He died in 1991 or 92, whatever it was. Feldstein recently died over the last few years. He was another one of the remaining artists, but so many of them died within the 80s and 90s and so forth. So Jack Davis was one of the major artists for EC on Tales from the Crypt. Now I'm going to show you some Tales from the Crypt book, but let's first show you Creepy #1, which Jack Davis did. Definitely see, look at that. Now Jack Davis is definitely one of my favorites, but sometimes, and I don't know if I have an example here. I think I do. Let me see. I don't have an example here, but sometimes he drew characters and made them kind of almost look like chimps. There was sometimes you look at the way he drew somebody and they look like a chimpanzee. That's one thing I didn't like, but most of the time that wasn't the case. Classic Jack Davis cover, The Origin of the Crypt Keeper, as you can see. And Tales from the Crypt 33. Jack Davis became the main artist for Tales from the Crypt, just as Johnny Craig was the main artist for The Vault of Horror, as Graham Ingalls was the main artist for The Haunt of Fear. Now, Graham Ingalls is my favorite artist, but I don't have too many Haunt of Fears, oddly enough. I mainly have Tales from the Crypt. So I got plenty of examples of Jack Davis, classic werewolf cover. I think this was the only issue where the Crypt Keeper was like positioned that way in the portrait. You know, it's usually he's forward facing, but this one looked like he's just leaning over. A little odd, but great cover. The first Tales from the Crypt book I ever read, Tales from the Crypt 39. Really great cover. Love it. 38. One of the censored covers, a gift from Dr. Von Schiller. Thank you again. And here's another werewolf cover, one of the famous ones. The last issue of Tales from the Crypt, issue 46. First time you have like a black background. Usually the backgrounds of Tales from the Crypt are like a red or like a blue, and sometimes like a brownish color. Those were the colors you usually saw in the background, but this was the only issue in the line that had a black. And it looks sleek, and it's a lantern cover, so I'm sure this is on Patrick's want list. And the last one, this is CGC. This was a cover that it took a while for it to grow on me. When I mean a while, when I first saw this cover back in the early 90s, I was like, it's okay. But within the last few years, this cover has become one of my favorite Jack Davis covers. And that's Tales from the Crypt number 40, where the diver, or the treasure hunter, I think, is opening up a clam and boom. There's no pearl in that clam. Definitely one of the more famous Jack Davis Tales from the Crypt covers. Well, that's it for this episode. There'll be other episodes down the line showing some of my favorite artists and some of the more famous covers that they've done that I have in my collection. Thank you for watching.